What if the wait isn't the problem, but the answer? You prayed, you waited, you tried to move on, tried to heal, tried to trust. And still, the loneliness is there, quiet, persistent, whispering that maybe you're the exception. Maybe everyone else gets it and you don't. Maybe there's something fundamentally different about you that keeps love just out of reach. Maybe the problem has been you all along. But what if the wait isn't evidence of abandonment? What if the right person hasn't appeared yet because God is building you into someone who can actually sustain what's coming? What if the silence you've been hearing isn't rejection, but preparation? Because here's the truth nobody tells you about God's timing. He never delays by accident. He delays by design. The first thing you need to understand is this: God is protecting you from a connection that would have broken you. That's hard to hear when you're in the middle of the loneliness. But think about it carefully. The problem isn't that love doesn't exist for you. The problem is that certain versions of you would have arrived at it carrying so much emptiness that you would have confused need with love, dependence with devotion, urgency with destiny. You would have found a person and handed them the weight that only God can carry. And when they couldn't hold it, because no human being can, you would have called it a failure of love. But it would have been a failure of expectation. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, Scripture describes the danger of joining yourself to someone whose spiritual foundation is pulling in the opposite direction. This isn't an arbitrary rule, it's a description of mechanics. Two opposing forces applied to the same vessel don't make it move faster, they tear it apart. The problem isn't the strength of the connection, it's the direction of the foundations. Think about Samson. His story is recorded in the book of Judges, chapters 13 through 16. He had strength beyond anything any human could imagine. But there was a weakness he couldn't see in himself. He kept confusing attraction with calling, emotional intensity with divine confirmation. Every time his spiritual strength should have prevailed, his emotional vulnerability took over. And when Delilah entered the story, Samson didn't just lose his hair, he lost his sight, his freedom, and nearly his entire life. And it all started with one connection God never authorized. One wrong person at the wrong time, and the most gifted man of his generation was sitting in chains. You're not in a waiting season because you're not enough. You're in a waiting season because God saw what an earlier version of you would have done with the wrong person, and He refused to let that happen. But there's something even deeper going on here. Before God sends someone to walk alongside you, He wants to make sure you know how to walk without needing someone. That's not cruelty. That's the difference between a foundation built on rock and one built on sand. In Matthew 7:24-25, Jesus describes what happens when a storm hits each one. One stands, one collapses. And what separates them isn't the size of the house built on top, it's what's underneath. The question isn't whether the storm is coming, it's what will be under you when it does. Foundations aren't built when everything is fine. They're built in the waiting, in the silence, in the moments when you learn that you don't need someone else to confirm who you are in order for you to keep being it. In the moments when you discover that your identity doesn't depend on a relationship to be real, it exists apart from that, anchored in something more permanent than any person could ever be. The kind of identity that doesn't shift when people leave, when relationships end, when prayers go unanswered. The kind of identity that was never borrowed from anyone else in the first place. The story of Adam in Genesis 2 tells us something most people read too fast to catch. Before God ever introduced Eve, the text records that Adam already had identity, purpose, and work. He named the animals. He tended the garden. He was active in his calling. He wasn't wandering around the garden asking God when someone was coming. He was already doing what he was made to do. Eve wasn't created to complete an empty man. She was created to walk alongside someone who already knew where he was going. Two halves don't make a whole. Two halves make a fracture. And this is where the waiting starts to make a different kind of sense. God is making you whole first, not as punishment, but as preparation. so that when the right person arrives, you're not bringing desperation to the table, you're bringing strength, you're bringing clarity. You're bringing a version of yourself that knows the difference between wanting to be loved and knowing how to be loved. Because those two things are not the same, and the gap between them is exactly the space the waiting season is designed to close. But here's where most people stumble. They confuse loneliness with delay. There's a massive difference between being alone and being empty. The loneliness that leads to desperation is the kind that tries to be filled by anything. It says, "I need someone, anyone, now." It forces doors that aren't ready to open and calls it faith. But the loneliness God uses as a classroom is different. It's not rushing, it's learning, it's becoming. In Psalm 37:4, Scripture says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Notice the sequence. The delight isn't the reward for getting what you want. The delight is what transforms what you want. When you spend real time in God's presence, not just asking, but resting, listening, being shaped, the desires of your heart begin to realign. The patterns of your choices start to shift. The kind of love you're looking for starts to sound different. The red flags you used to rationalize start becoming visible. The things you used to call chemistry start revealing themselves as chaos. And slowly, almost without you noticing, what used to feel like urgency becomes peace. And it's in that process of realignment that God is also preparing the other person. Because God's timing isn't one-sided. While you're being built, someone else is being built. Missions are being aligned. Wounds are being healed on a side you can't see. Both of you are moving through seasons of formation that will make you capable of meeting each other with maturity, not desperation. And God, who sees the past and the future with the same clarity, is running two parallel processes that will one day converge. Not by accident, by orchestration. The story of Ruth, in the book that carries her name, is one of the most precise pictures of this in all of Scripture. Ruth lost her husband, lost her stability. She chose to leave everything she knew to care for Naomi, her mother-in-law, with no guarantee that life would get better. She wasn't hunting for a husband. She wasn't strategizing about where to find love. She was being faithful to what she had in her hands. A promise, an older woman who needed her, a foreign field she'd never worked before. It was in the middle of faithfulness, not in the middle of searching, that Boaz appeared. In Ruth 2:3, the text says with an elegance that almost sounds casual, "She happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz." The word "happened" in that verse sounds almost like coincidence. But there are no coincidences inside divine providence. Ruth didn't choose Boaz's field, she was guided there. While she was walking in her purpose, God was directing her steps without her knowing it. That's the pattern. The right person shows up when you're doing what God asked you to do, not when you're doing everything in your power to make the right person show up. And that's why desperate searching never works the way it should. Not because God is indifferent to the desire, but because desperation makes us try to force God's calendar, and forcing God's calendar is like picking fruit before it's ripe. It has the right shape, but the flavor isn't there yet. In Ecclesiastes 3:1, Scripture declares, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." What Solomon is describing isn't fatalism, it's architecture. There is a structure underneath the events of life that human eyes rarely see while they're inside them. The wait is part of that structure. It isn't the gap between the important things, it is one of the important things. It's where character gets tested. It's where faith deepens beyond what words can describe. It's where you discover that God is sufficient, not as a second-rate consolation, but as an absolute foundation. And there's a specific moment inside the wait that changes everything. It's the moment you stop asking, when, and start asking, what are you building in me right now? It's the moment the loneliness stops being a waiting room and becomes a formation room. It's the moment you realize you're not standing outside something good, you're inside the process that's making you capable of receiving what's coming. That shift is not small. That shift is the whole thing. In Isaiah 40:31, Scripture promises, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." What Isaiah is describing isn't passivity. It's not sitting still waiting for something to fall from the sky. It's an active form of trust, waiting with your heart turned toward God. The kind of waiting that renews instead of depletes. The kind that transforms you while it moves you forward. The eagles aren't standing still, they're mounting up. The movement comes from the waiting, not despite it. Now I need to speak directly to you. If you're reading this today, there's a good chance you're carrying something heavy. Maybe you've lost count of how many times you've asked God for this. Maybe you've watched people around you find love and started wondering if there's a different category for you, the category of people who don't get it. Maybe you've even reached the point of questioning whether God actually has something prepared, or whether you just need to accept that this part of life isn't for you. I want to ask you something serious. What would you do if you knew for certain that the right person is being prepared right now, in this exact moment? Could you breathe differently? Could you stop running after answers that haven't come yet? Could you trust that God's silence in this area isn't neglect, it's craftsmanship? Because God is not ignoring you. He's making you wait for the same reason an architect waits for concrete to cure before building on top of it. Not because the concrete is weak, but because the structure that's going to be built on it deserves a foundation that can hold. The delay isn't the problem. The delay is part of the design. The wait is not where your story stopped. It's where it's being written more carefully. You're not waiting because you're stuck. You're waiting because God is preparing you for something that's going to need every part of the version you're becoming right now. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you'll look back at this season and understand every piece of it. Not with resignation, with gratitude. Because the love God is designing for you isn't the kind that finds you desperate and keeps you that way. It's the kind that finds you whole and helps you grow further. The kind that doesn't compete with God's voice in your life, but confirms it. The kind that doesn't make you question your worth, but walks beside you as the two of you discover together what you were both called to build. The kind that Priscilla and Aquila had in Acts 18, not just a marriage, but a shared mission. Not just a companion, but a kingdom partner. That doesn't come from rushing, it doesn't come from desperation. It comes from the place where you learned to be complete before you needed to be found. You are being prepared, not abandoned, prepared. If this touched something in you today, I want to ask you a question. What's the hardest part of the wait for you right now? Leave it in the comments, because you're not alone in this, and the stories people share here sometimes say exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this reached you in the right place, share it with someone who's walking through the same season. There's a next video that's going to continue this conversation from an angle you probably haven't considered yet. The wait is not the end of the story, it's where the story starts to make sense.